This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have one of the most influential figures in the history of the fantasy sports industry, a Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer since 2011. It's my pleasure to welcome from the Pacific Northwest, senior editor at The Athletic, Brandon Funston. So excited to have you on, my friend.
What's up, Kevin, man? It's great to see you again. It's nice to connect with my Northwest homie here. And just thinking back, what was it, 2017 when we met? Something like that? Back in Fort Worth, Texas?
Fort Worth, Texas, the National Fantasy Football Conference, Convention, the NFFC. Fort Worth, Texas.
They don't do that anymore, I don't think, right?
No, they did that one NFFC. And the next year it followed up with SportsCon, which was basically like, I think they said, let's expand it to more sports. I don't think it went all that great. And then COVID hit and it hasn't been back.
I remember Brad Evans and I took our picture with Pat Mahomes, and that was before he exploded for his first breakout season. So we felt like we touched him with greatness, and he went on and did it there. But that was actually pretty cool. One of my more favorite photos I have in my library is of, a young Patrick Mahomes there at that fantasy conference. So pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. It was a fun event. I mean, we got to meet so many people, and then the athletes that they brought in. Yeah, it was that class. I mean, there was a lot of high profile football stars that were just about to break out. So my favorite picture from that event, me, you, and Brad Evans. And it was the fantasy football counselor that took the photo.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right.
So funny, just random stuff, but good memories all around. And yeah. And obviously, spent some time with you at FSGA events. But my favorite experience with you obviously was the Scott Fish Bowl 12 Seattle live draft. It was such an honor to have you there. For me, especially just, when I think back to my early days playing fantasy, I would say that you're probably the first analyst that I was ever really aware of. I just consumed content, on my own. I didn't really pay attention to who was writing it. I'd make my own rankings and play the game, right? And then obviously, you guys burst onto the scene with Yahoo and the digital age and all your little short videos and stuff. It was hard not to notice, Brandon Funston and then Andy Behrens and Brad Evans. It was good times. And so for you to come to my dwelling and participate in just a kind of a boutique fantasy football draft experience, it was an honor.
Well, you are an awesome commissioner. I mean, I can't even explain all you did to deck that place out, but you have like the walk through the hallway where it looks like the fishbowl, and like you did it right. So, yeah, I mean, that was just a lot of fun to go to do that, and check that out and see how over the top you are. But I love the enthusiasm, and that's what makes it great,
I mean, I love fantasy, and to me, that league experience is, it's the core, it's the foundation, it's why most people have fallen in love with the game. And so I try to go big or go home with drafts. And so I wanted to obviously bring something special with SFB, and the way that hallway did turn out with the fishbowl, I mean, that was just pure luck. But sometimes you just gotta go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, so definitely cool. I don't think the season worked out too well for me that year, but at least we had a good draft day.
Yeah, no, I mean, once upon a time, I made a top 20 in Scott Fish. Was there that final weekend, but since then, it's just been about fun in the community and having a good time. So exactly. It's tricky drafting so early, but it's also such a fun event that kicks off the season. Such great work with charity and everything. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the winning is the cherry on top if you happen to do it, but it's like kicking things off. I mentioned off air, it's a little too early to actually to do your actual drafts for real. So you just got to kind of roll with it, and hope that you can do well and try to think as much ahead as possible. But it's really all about just the community camaraderie and the cause that it's for and all of that.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about your background. Obviously, you've been in the Pacific Northwest. What was it like growing up? Were you a big sports fan just early on? What are your fondest memories of Seattle, the Seattle sports scene as a kid?
Yeah. So I think probably baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards got me into sports. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, how did I get so crazy about it? Because my parents were mild sports fans, but not like big and not really pushing me. But I just kind of naturally was inclined to that. And honestly, I was fascinated by the backs of the cards and, you know, the numbers on there and what they meant. And so I think, you know, in my early days, that's what got me going. Once I started learning about it, you know, it just propelled me. I can remember going on road trips on vacations with my parents sitting in the back seat as a young kid and, you know, 8, 9 years old, reading the box scores like I'm an announcer, you know, and was like reading them to my parents who didn't care, but they just let me ramble on, you know. And I remember seeing the Elias Sports Bureau tag at the bottom of the newspaper, and I was like, well, maybe I could work there someday. You know, you know, my thought was that's probably the only way I can keep doing this is I'll have to go work for some sports statistics company. So, yeah, so I was, you know, I was into it all the time, and I don't know, I just remember everything like cereal. You remember, I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me, but like, my era, like cereal boxes and potato chips and soda cans, everything had sports players on it, you know? And I was
for sure.
like, I was always just into all that stuff. So, the collecting of it and postering my wall with posters and, you know, and things like that. So just kind of, you know, the fact that I actually was able to go and make a living doing this was beyond my wildest dreams at the time. I just loved it and was a fan. So
Yeah, I mean, I was the same way, you know, exact way with cards and you know, getting into statistics. That's, you know, that's, I think that's where I fell in love with this, the idea of fantasy sports is those card collecting, the stats. And you're right. I mean, you go to 7-Eleven, you got you got a little card, you know, a little card on the, or a little
yeah,
circular card of a player underneath it. Everywhere you go, you get cards. The cards, the 80s were the best for all of that stuff. So
yeah, it's like, oh, I can't throw that away. I got to keep that.
yeah, for sure. I love it. So when did you discover fantasy sports?
That's a good question. I was trying to think. I think I remember I had like this old kind of tattered book that was sort of like a breakdown of what rotisserie baseball was. It kind of started in a rotisserie baseball before football. And I remember I threw together some friends. I think I was a freshman in high school, and we drafted baseball teams, and we never looked at them again until the end of the year. Then I sat down and I tallied everybody's end of season totals and told everybody, like, you know, who was the winner and who was the loser and things like that. But it was very rudimentary. But I think the next season we got into fantasy football, and what we would do is I think it was probably just a touchdown only league with maybe 100-yard bonuses, but you would go to school the next day, and if you beat your opponent, then they owed you $1, and if you lost, you owed them $1. And we just took care of it each week. It was like the dollar swap league, you know, and that was how we played it out. And I think Roger Craig, I had him when he had his 1,000, you know, rushing yard, receiving yard season. That was my first fantasy football team. So
Nice.
That was a good way to start things off.
Do you remember like content back then? Like how did you, or do you remember having any content creators that you were aware of, or was it all just kind of you going off your own stats and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was into, I would read the USA Today and the sports pages of the Seattle Times and the Seattle PI. Sporting news. I was big into sporting news, so I could get my hands on that. I never had a Sports Illustrated subscription. Wasn't a big SI guy, but those ones were the ones. And then when it came to like fantasy football in the very earliest days of when I was, you know, when we were a little bit more further along, it was Fantasy Football Index, which is a Seattle local magazine, but they were one of the first ones, and they're still a great group of guys running that. And you know, I don't really espouse the virtues of using a magazine anymore for your drafts, but like I still like to look at them, and they were back in the day, they were like, you know, leaders in putting out the good content for fantasy football drafts.
Yeah, for me, like sporting news, that's where I first dove into like a fantasy football contest. It was like 1995, and yeah, it was sporting news. So all those references definitely ring a bell for me. Now, obviously, you're a pioneer of fantasy sports content in this era. You were one of the very first to be on TV. I mean, writing, being in front of the camera, managing teams behind the scenes. You've you've done it all. Take me back to where it all began. How did you start your career in fantasy? When did you start creating content?
Yeah, I was kind of, to be honest, I was kind of spinning my wheels at Western Washington University. I bounced around different majors, and again, not really realizing that this career that I ended up with was even possible. So ended up taking a break for Western, didn't actually get my degree. Decided to go to Africa, and ex-girlfriend from high school's parents were teaching in an international school in Kenya, and they're like, you can come stay there and check out Africa for like months. They offered to let me stay there for most of the year and be a JV basketball coach for the local international school there. But wow. I went over there for 4 months, and what actually brought me back was a buddy of mine called. He graduated from Western Washington with a journalism degree. He was like my best friend, and said, hey, they're starting this company. It's going to be ESPN's website, ESPN.sportzone. It's ESPNnet.sportzone.com is what they called it originally before it just rolled it into ESPN.com. But it was a Paul Allen company. He said, they want to do fantasy football, and no one really knows much about it. So you should come down and interview for it, because I was always the guy that ran all of our leagues and stuff. And so, yeah, I flew back to the United States, went and interviewed, and got hired at ESPN for basically their original product. I think they'd rolled out baseball or football kind of just as a very bare bones product. And so I came in right after that initial rollout and was there doing basically everything, answering emails, customer service, and then when it started to hey, we need to build some content around this, they let me kind of basically take the reins of that and, manage and hire people and do a lot of the writing as well. So from there, it just grew, and, I was 8 years at ESPN. I was 13 years at Yahoo, and now 5 years at The Athletic.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean the Brandon Funston coaching tree is incredible, right? How many FSWA Hall of Fame members have you hired or worked with over the years, right?
Yeah, there's a few. Most directly the Yahoo ones where I hired Chris Harris, I hired Andy Behrens, I hired Brad Evans, Scott Pianowski, Dalton Del Don. All those guys were kind of people that I brought in when I was initially there. So that was a great crew. I love the guys I worked with at ESPN as well, but the salad days it was the time that I got to work with those guys down at Yahoo. It was a great time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 13 years at obviously, I'm sure countless memories, but such an integral part or time of the fantasy football industry. What was it like being a part of something something that just boomed at that time?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I mean, I started to catch that with ESPN, and it was the .com bubble. It's not only fantasy, but it was just .com in general. The amount of excess and just corporate spending waste was insane. But we were all loving it. And then, so when I was at ESPN, I moved out to Bristol for like 3.5 years, and I was a West Coast guy, and I saw what Yahoo was doing with their stat tracker, which was blowing up. It was a product that just wasn't on the market anywhere else, where you basically were tracking your team in real time, and like it was, everybody had to have it. And I was like, man, Yahoo's countering ESPN by not charging for their game. They got stat tracker and they're free to play. And so I was like, they got a good thing going on. So I just kind of dropped at one of those fantasy conferences, or in the early days, I dropped a little, whisper to the guy running Yahoo, Larry Tobin, the Yahoo Fantasy Group, and said, hey man, if you're looking, I'm interested. And he called me back right away. I mean, he's like, I'm interested. And he called me back when I was at Bristol and brought me out there. And I always had like this idealized of what California would be, golden California dreaming kind of a deal. And it hit it to a T. Like to me, I landed and everything was encased in amber. It just was like, I was only living in California ended up living down there for about 1.5 years, but I loved the California lifestyle. But it was during that time that we started bringing it. Actually, it was after I moved back to the Northwest that I brought in was able to bring in Brad and Andy and Chris Harris and a bunch of the guys that we had. When I first got there was Mike Harmon, who does the Fox Sports Radio with Jason Smith. Mike Harmon and a couple other guys, but Yahoo moved their fantasy group to LA and allowed us to really kind of like hire out and bring in some new voices, and that kind of ushered in all those guys I'm talking about. So it was great. I mean, just it was like just catching that wave, the wave. Yeah. Just like when I'm not a bit, I've surfed a couple times, but I know that the excitement is like you're about ready for that thing to hit, and you got it and you're about ready to ride it. And that was where we were at.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can remember, my home league started, like 2001, I believe, in, with the breaking of Yahoo into the world and online. And so that, you say stat tracker and it just made me go back. Like,
that was huge.
It was absolutely
huge. Yeah.
Going from playing, on paper and calling into the commissioner and I mean, such a change to an industry. Obviously, it, doesn't surprise you that it blew up. Tell me about your time with the Athletic. Obviously, it's been what, 5 years plus right now.
5 years now, yeah.
How's that experience been?
It's so funny how I've gone from ESPN to Yahoo and the Athletic, and the day-to-day and what I actually do is so similar. Everything is just the same. It's and it's a great group. I don't know if you know Nando DeFino. He's a guy I work with there. He runs the whole fantasy betting group, and he's just an A+ guy, just a salt of the earth dude. So he's been great to work with. Jake Seeley is kind of the, he's the bell cow running back of the group right now in terms of the content and the rankings and stuff. But it's a good group of guys. We get along great. Everything. It's always Fantasy Island for me because I'm part of a bigger sports group where I've always been. And it's always like they kind of just leave fantasy alone because it's just like back in the day when they hired me at ESPN. It's like not everybody speaks the language or really knows. It's almost like you're this foreign company within the group, and so people just kind of let you do your thing, and you tell them what you need because and there's not a lot of pushback because they don't know a lot of times. So it's kind of fun. You get a lot of autonomy in fantasy groups within a bigger sports company as a whole.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I've been fortunate to meet so many amazing people in the industry. Nando's one guy that I just have not connected with, but I've always heard just the best things about. I mean,
he really is great. You guys would get along swimmingly for sure. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. He likes nice people, and so you guys.
Well, he's definitely on my bucket list. I need to connect with Nando and Jake. I mean, Jake is phenomenal. I love that guy. He's such a kind human being and funny and I love everything about Jake.
He amazes me because he will answer every comment. That's his thing. He answers every comment. Yeah. And I did that for a few years back in ESPN and in even Yahoo and the big boards when I would put them out. And I finally just said, I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I just can't. I lost the stamina. I'm 26 years in the industry. At some point you do. And I'm just like, I don't know. Jake's going pretty strong. We'll see how long he can go. But he's a throwback in that regard for sure.
That's awesome. And you guys brought in Jay Felicio recently, right? Too. I mean, he's a wonderful guy. So you guys obviously you have value in quality people. I love it.
Yeah. And Nando's very well connected. I've been around. I know a lot of people. Jake's very well connected. So it's nice to kind of pull in people like Jay Felicio when you need stuff, And so, I feel good about what we're able to do in terms of bringing in quality voices for sure.
That's awesome. Now tell me a little bit about some of the other side projects you're doing with Brad Evans and the podcasts you've done in the past.
Yeah. So Brad and I've done, we had a couple of years on Sirius XM. We had our own, time slot with the Fade to Noise. Right now, I'm doing Live on the Line with him mostly on Fridays. We do an NFL show, but Live on the Line, it's funny. Up in the Northwest, we don't get Bally Sports, but it's a pretty, prevalent it's a pretty prevalent network across the country. It's just kind of like if you go from Denver diagonally to the Northwest, they don't really have any coverage in that area. So I don't usually watch myself, but across the rest of the country, it's on all the time. But I'll do like an an hour-long show on Fridays where we basically go through our favorite prop bets from each game and stuff like that. So, I do locally. I do Thursday half an hour on KJR radio 950, and it's just from year to year. It's just I never know what my side things might end up being. I kind of have an idea what some of them will be, but I've been working with Brad forever, and he's tireless and trying to do stuff. And sometimes he just drops something on my plate, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So, and that's the nice thing about The Athletic as well, is they're kind of pretty comfortable with letting us go out and do some of these things on the side.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I get to hear when you come onto the radio with Ian Furness. It's always fun. It's always fun to see that.
I always wonder, like, is this good radio? It's just a nonstop start sit of callers, and it's like, and I'm basically just yelling, or just saying names for like a half an hour. It's like Gabe Davis, sit Jahan Dotson, whatever. It's like that's basically so whatever. I mean,
that's for local radio, right?
I've been doing it for like 12 years, so apparently they think it's working. So
that's good. Yeah, one of my best friends is he's a neighbor of Ian Furness, so
nice.
It's always fun to kind of see how
does he live out in your neck of the woods? I think he
does. Yeah, I mean, seriously, like 10 minutes down the road, I know people that golf with him regularly. So yeah, good guy, well known in this area, and he's just right down. That's what's funny. We should have had him come to the draft because you were just 5 minutes from him.
Yeah, well, they're talking about doing a listener draft or some kind of KGR draft next year, so we'll see. And if we can rope in some of the locals from his area, then that even better.
Hey, let me know. I will play in that league for sure. That would be a lot of fun. I know they have a neighborhood league that my friend's aware of. But yeah, so it's good stuff. Now, obviously, you've kind of seen it all during this digital age of fantasy sports. Does the growth of the game surprise you at all?
Not really, because I guess it's because I was kind of conditioned to it early on. It's funny, when I was at ESPN and we made the first football iteration, then when baseball came around the next season, it topped football, but then football topped baseball the next season. And like, I just saw this growth just from the very beginning. And, I think I haven't looked at the numbers in the last year or two. I kind of stopped, diving into them too deeply, but like, I would be surprised if we're growing at the rate that they were, but I don't think it stopped growing, which is still amazing because it's really an inundated product at this point. It's everywhere, it's pervasive, and at some point you're going to level off, but the appetite for this it never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, and obviously you got Matthew Berry getting on NBC and Football Night in America, that kind of stuff. Do you recall your first memories and impressions of Matthew Berry back in the day?
Actually, Matthew Berry tried to he came to me and interviewed for Yahoo, tried to get a job there. And I remember the guy that hired me, who was running the show, was like worried about, his quote was, he works too blue. And if you know what that means, it's like, it's a little bit sometimes too raunchy, too like pushing the envelope of what is like PG-13 or less, or whatever. And so that was his biggest fear about Matthew Berry. But we actually got along. And when he was running Talented Mr. Roto and I was going down to Yahoo, he connected with me. He was a big Jimmy Buffett fan. Like very early on, before he was at ESPN and stuff, we went to a Jimmy Buffett concert in Irvine, California, and would just kind of like hang out. My very first recollection with Matt Berry was at a fantasy sports conference, and we had a little football. Someone was giving away a bunch of little footballs, but we were in like this big bubble tent, like conference center, and we started throwing the little football around. And then I think Scott Engel and somebody else like came over, and it ended up being like Matt Berry and I playing Scott Engel and somebody else in a game of 2-on-2 out there. And so that was kind of like our first real hangout time. We used to always laugh about that. But so I knew Matt a long time ago when he was first starting out, for sure.
That's awesome. Now with Scott Engel, have you ever seen him sing karaoke?
I have. He's actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And of course it was Kiss.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was, gosh, I forget where that was at, but it was a while ago. And surprisingly, not bad. Not bad.
He's a performer. I mean, he's been like at the fantasy football expo the last few years. Man, he brings it to the karaoke. That's awesome.
Scott, yeah, he's a character, man.
New Yorker that's a Seattle Seahawks guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always the weirdest thing, but he loves the Seahawks. So as soon as I see him every time, it's the first thing he brings up is the Seahawks, or something about the Seahawks. So
yeah, I think he's been to one game in Seattle.
Yeah,
too,
I met him.
I
met him before he went over there. We went out to have lunch and hang out in Seattle for a little while, but he was excited about that for sure.
I love it. Well, so when it comes to the actual game, game of fantasy, what's your favorite part of the fantasy football experience?
Gosh, I mean, fantasy football is the thing I love about it is sticky. It's it can bring so many people together, and like the build up to Sunday is just awesome. There's nothing like it. You can't replicate it in other sports. There's one game a week, and like there's that. Nothing beats it. You can try to, and people do it for baseball and basketball, where you try to have like this weekly kind of setup, and it doesn't compare to the excitement of a Sunday when everybody's off and you're sitting around. But it also is such an easy game to keep friends together, and like you'll always have your best friends that you're always doing stuff with, but like the ones that are kind of like just good friends that you don't like. This is the way that like they're all tied together, and we have text threads and things where we're constantly commenting, and it's like just good to I keep way more in touch with a lot of people because of fantasy football than if there was none, and I love that about it.
Yeah. Do you have a primary home league, like one league that's like your main league?
Yeah, I do. I have one that it started out being called the Pro Imagination League of American Football. We called it the Peel-Off because I worked at the Pro Image in Bellingham, Washington. Nice. Remember the Pro Image store?
Oh, of course, man.
Yeah, I used to order all the starter jackets and all.
Nice.
But yeah, we had a league that kind of started around there, and a few other of my friends were involved, and that was like a paper league, and it slowly just evolved into one that we've had on Yahoo for. I think our first year on Yahoo was 2007. We had a couple years on ESPN before that, but before that it was paper league, So yeah, it's been going on in some form since '92. So that's what is that now? It's like I can't do it. It's
a long time, right?
It's almost like 30. It's like 30 years, man.
That's amazing.
Pretty crazy history.
That's awesome. Did you guys get together for live drafts back in the day when people were more local, or has it always been kind of spread out?
Yeah, and I threw a monkey wrench into things. Like we used to do it together, and then I moved out to Bristol, so that was like the couple years where we didn't get together, and then I was at Yahoo for a year. But then when I finally moved back up, we've basically decided that Labor Day for perpetuity is our day, and so we always tell everybody, "Hey, man, go take off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just be back by 1:00 on Monday. And if you want to golf, be back at 8:00 on Monday morning." So that's kind of been our deal for a long, long time now.
Nice. So the round of golf before the draft. That's perfect.
That's
perfect.
Yeah. Like we try to build a tradition around just make it a full day event, and we've so far so good.
That's awesome. Now, do you have a favorite last place punishment? Maybe not something you've done, but something that you've seen out there that makes you laugh the most.
Well, the tattoo stuff is crazy, and the going to the Waffle House or whatever is crazy. But I would say what we've done is we had a Justin Bieber shirt with his head in the peroxide Justin Bieber hair, like a full size image shirt that we would give to the last place team. And that person, if you had to wear it out when you were going out with other people in the league, like that was like, you had to do that. So that was always pretty fun. We have a toilet seat in another league that is for the last place team. And during the next year's draft, it's, in theory, we lost it for a little while, but when we had it, the theory was you could basically pass it around the league and quote unquote press the flesh, everybody get a chance to sit on the toilet seat. And then that's your toilet seat. And we had the little plaque thing, or, the little tag on it that puts your team down as the last place team. So it's kind of like a last place trophy.
I love it. That's great. Do you have favorite settings or preferred settings?
I think one of the things that I've incorporated a lot more is first down. First down, accounting. I think it's more important than PPR, and so we've kind of dialed down on PPR and bumped up first downs because the name of the game is moving the chains. So we make sure to replicate that. I prefer Superflex formats. I actually don't love auction. I'm just like I know everybody loves it, and it's like I don't fall in love with players so much that I have to have certain players, and I feel mad if I don't get them. And I just don't like the amount of time it takes. Like I love drafts, but I don't know that I like to sit there and just when you're kind of down in your budget and just have to sit out and watch people bid on players and wait around. Like I don't love that. So I would say that I'm probably in the minority for sure in not being an auction guy over traditional snake drafts. And then the other thing I'd say is I like flexibility. So if you have 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, that's 7 spots. I like the idea of like 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, 1 tight end, and 4 flex spots. Like let's get fun, because my original league started out, you had your choice of Pro Set, which was 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers.
Okay.
Wishbone, which was 1 running back, 3 tight ends, and then I think it was 1 wide receiver. So you could choose your formation, and then you could set your lineup that way. And I always thought it was kind of fun. And so can't quite replicate that now, but I like the flexibility of multiple flex spots.
That's fun. Yeah, no, I think that multiple flexes is definitely fun. It just allows people to be more creative with their roster builds. I love it. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions, get to know you a bit better.
Yeah.
What would you rather have? A Mariners World Series victory, a Kraken Stanley Cup, Marshawn Lynch getting the ball at the goal line and getting those back-to-back Super Bowl championships, or the Seattle Sonics to return?
Oh gosh, you had me at Marshawn Lynch until you said the Sonics return. That's something that I want that, and I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen anyways. So I'm going to cheat and say Marshawn
I love
because that has haunted me ever since. Like, oh God, I remember when that happened and the interception happened. I was at a party with some friends, and like I told my wife, "Let's go." I was so pissed off, and then I remember we went down to Yahoo, and I had a trip down to Yahoo, and it was the best thing for me. I just had to get away from the Northwest, but that thing has haunted my dreams. So sorry, this isn't rapid fire, but
no, it's fine.
That would make things so right in my mind if Marshawn got that ball and scored that touchdown, and So, but Sonics in 25, 26. Let's go.
Let's go. No, I will pause the rapid fire and say, yeah. I mean, most people, I would say most people are like, oh yeah, Mariners, they need a World Series. That would change everything. So that's kind of a chalk answer to me.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Like, Sonics, they're coming.
They're coming.
That's such
happening.
Have you forgiven the OKC fan base or anyone involved yet? Because I haven't.
I haven't. I was watching OKC the other night. I was like, God, I would love this team. I would just wish they had a different name. I like all their players. I think that's a really good team, but there's no way in hell I'm rooting for that team.
Oh no, I agree. But no, you're right. I can the Seahawks deal. I was actually at that Super Bowl, dream come true, go to the Super Bowl. I was in the corner of the end zone where it happened. And just like you said, you just left the party. We left that Super Bowl, and walking out, it was just like a ghost town because so much of the attendance were Seahawks fans. It was the weirdest experience. Like, whereas you'd expect, for me, just a football fan going to the Super Bowl of all things, like I expect kind of some spectacle, some just craziness. When you leave, and it was just the weirdest, most surreal. I still haven't even watched the full broadcast about it. So.
Oh yeah. I go on. We could commiserate forever on that. I was close to mental health, like emergency at that point. I was like, God, I could really use some professional help to talk me down right now, because that was so bad.
It is, because to me, that's the right answer, because it cements the legacy for Pete, for the LOB. It's just, it would have, and for Marshawn, obviously. So. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Speaking of, who's your favorite member of the LOB?
Oh God, that's a great question. It's got to have to be Cam, right? Like, I mean, it's got to be Cam. So he's the only guy who's stood the test of time with the legacy. I mean, Sherman and Earl Thomas have had some bumpy spots along the way.
Yeah,
but the enforcer, and you could think back about so many of those awesome Cam hits. He was a stud.
Yeah, he broke Vernon Davis. Who did you like? Who did you like more back in the day, Gary Payton or Sean Kemp?
Yeah, that's probably honestly Kemp. I mean, I loved Peyton, but like I have so many memories of going to Sonic games and seeing just ridiculous Sean Kemp dunks, at the game where he's grabbing his crotch and dunking over Alton Lister, so yeah, but that's close. I love both of those guys.
That's good. Kurt Warner or Sean Alexander?
Sean Alexander. I think Sean Alexander gets disrespected in the Seattle world like that. I mean, he, would go out of bounds and things and question his toughness. But when that guy got close to the end zone, I don't think there was anybody more motivated in the world to score a touchdown. So and he's a super nice guy. I've had a chance to talk to him and interview him on Sirius Sports or on Sirius XM, and just a great guy.
Awesome. Jim Zorn, Dave Craig, or Matt Hasselbeck?
Give me Mudbone, man. I love Dave Craig. I loved his moxie. He's coming from Milton College and doesn't exist anymore, and just being the underdog and driving the old beat up car to camp and stuff. Like I loved his story, and that was really when the Seahawks finally got good for the first time. So gotta go with Dave Craig.
My when I think of Dave Craig, though, I think of Derek Thomas and 7 sacks. Yeah, that
and the fumbles,
and and stuff,
and the throwing the football, but it's not in his hand anymore.
Yeah. That's awesome. Ricky Waters or Derek Fenner?
Fenner, gosh. Let's go. I'm going to go with Ricky Waters. Fenner could have had this, but he just didn't have quite the long enough window, So give me Ricky Waters.
How about Jacob Green or Cortez Kennedy? Like who's more, beloved in your heart?
Honestly, it's probably Jacob Green because the same deal. It's Dave Craig era. It's
it's
when they first got good. And Cortez Kennedy he got like defensive player of the year on one of the worst Seahawks teams of all time. It's insane. But I loved Tez, but I got back to my deeper roots with Jacob Green.
I'm setting you up with I'm expecting these kind of answers because again we have the same kind of childhood.
Have recency bias here.
No, this is wonderful.
Expand the perspective here.
This is good. Bigger bust: the Boz, Dan McGuire, or Rick Meyer?
The Boz probably because of just the buildup. I mean, first, early quarterback picks in the draft busting. That is not a surprise, but Brian Bosworth and just the brand that he brought and what he was supposed to do, that was a big letdown for sure.
That's funny. That's great. So what are your favorite hobbies outside of fantasy sports?
Still play basketball. I've been playing basketball for a long time now. It's slowing down a little bit. Hiking, biking, and listening to music. Love music. Those are kind of the main things. Mowing my lawn.
I love it. I had Brad on a few weeks ago, and I think I don't know the exact quote, but I think he called you a sneaky athlete.
That's his way of saying you put on some weight over the years. Yeah, you put on some weight over the years, so people might not realize that.
It'll surprise you.
Exactly.
What's the last TV show that you binged?
I guess Beckham. That was a couple days ago. I did 3 in one night and then had to watch the final one the next night. Okay. I did 2.5 episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm really late last night, so that could technically count.
What's your all-time favorite show?
I think if you're talking like drama, I'm like The Wire or The Sopranos. But I'm a huge half-hour comedy guy, like Community, Modern Family, Arrested Development, Seinfeld, The Office. I could just put those on and just watch them.
Yeah.
Watch
That's great
four,
for just
4 or 5 in a row, just kind of in the background,
Background, exactly. Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
That's kind of tough as well. I would say, if I'm being honest, the movie I probably watched the most is Dazed and Confused because that was like such a picture of my life. Like I was in middle school in the late 70s. My brother was like in high school, and like all of his friends. That was such a picture of my childhood. And so, I get nostalgic watching that. That's up there. I mean, Shawshank Redemption, Princess Bride, The Matrix blew me away. The Natural and Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, because I was a sports guy. So the trilogy of baseball.
I was gonna follow up. Yeah, I was gonna follow up with sports movie, and I mean, The Natural, Field of Dreams, Bull Durham. I mean, you just nailed it for sure.
Yeah, and a little comic relief. You got to throw Major League in there, So.
Yep. I mean, Major League. Exactly. I mean, hey, this is we're right on the same page here.
This is wheelhouse stuff. Exactly.
I love it. I love it. What's your favorite thing about living in the Pacific Northwest?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously not the rain, which has been a thing of late, but like I feel like the summers are getting better. I think it's like, it's a temperate climate where everything's not too crazy, but it's like mountains to sea. Like it's beautiful. It's diverse, and it's geology, and not too crazy. Like when I lived in Connecticut, it's like, oh my God, this winter is unbelievably cold. And like this summer, like I can't stop sweating all summer long. It's like, I like kind of riding down the middle when it comes to the temperature. And hey man, it as well as I do. These summers are actually getting hotter and hotter. So
yeah,
there is that.
For sure. Now, do you have a favorite restaurant?
I don't think I have a favorite restaurant. I mean, if I said something in Paulsville, Washington, that wouldn't really resonate with anybody anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I loved, like, one of my favorite things when I worked at ESPN is we worked at the Smith Tower, and every once in a while we'd have like a group, eat at the Met, which I always just thought was like cool, old school Seattle, like going and like getting a steak there. So that was some of my favorite times. And then there's a place in UW called Agua Verde. It's a little Mexican place in the UW, university area that is right on the water. And my wife and I always love to hit that once or twice a year. So,
well, there you go. Do you have a favorite band or musician?
Another tough one. I would say I'm kind of a Bob Marley, Jack Johnson, chill kind of guy, but I love Pearl Jam. Kind of a new, like more modern that I listen to a lot. It's Gorillaz. I don't know if you know Gorillaz. I'm trying to think. I was big in Excess back in the day. I grew up on like Journey and the Eagles and like Def Leppard and all the classic rock, but I'm reggae, kind of the Jack Johnson, Bob Marley vibe. I can put that on all day long.
Nice. So where's your favorite place to go on vacation?
Like out of the country, probably like Cabo. Been there a couple times. Like going to Mexico, but like more often than not, we tend to go sort of more local, which would be, I would say, Bend is like our place to go. And a lot of people in the Northwest like to hit Bend. It's fun.
Yeah, that's good. So when were you first called Senior Fun Buns?
It's 100% Brad Evans. It was Senior Fun Bags, and I told him, we kind of was like, I prefer Fun Buns, and so he rolled with that. So if we have to go there, that's where it's at. So that was probably, gosh, I don't know, sometime in the mid 2010s, somewhere in there. So probably
now, is it okay for anybody to call you Senior Fun Buns, or is it just Brad?
I don't really care. I mean, you can call me. I mean, unless I don't like you already.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you can call me Senior Fun Bun.
Okay, I like it. I got to pass. I love it. What do you remember the first time you met Brad Evans and when you hired him?
The first time Matt Berry, that's when I knew Matt. He was running Talented Mr. Roto. I was like, give me some names of some guys that you're, basically getting to do stuff for you for practically nothing that you think could, deserve a bigger shot. And so he gave me a list, and Brad was on it, and Chris Harris was on it, among others. And I ended up interviewing. Well, I listened to Brad before I ever talked to him, and he was basically sounded like he was in a closet, and he was just, it sounded like he was talking to other people, but he was just talking to himself about college basketball and some other things. And I was like, my God, this guy is so comfortable just sitting there talking. I don't even know that he remembers that he recorded himself. It's like, okay, we got to talk to this guy. So we brought him in and took him around the office and interviewed him, and he acted like he had been working at Yahoo already for like a couple of years, and was like talking to everybody and just so comfortable in his own skin. And I was like, okay, this guy's, he's different in a good way. And so we brought him in. But I don't know if that jives with his story.
Yeah, he says that basically you guys spent time together, and then you said, I think he thinks that you said that you didn't like him, but you're going to hire him, which he said that you would say that that's not true. And I believe your story without even hearing your story.
Well, I would tell him as we went on, because like he was not an easy person to manage, because try to corral Brad Evans. Good luck. Yes. Yeah. So that was the difficulty. And I had some moments with him for sure where it was like, we can't do that. We can't say that. We can't, blah, blah, blah. I remember there was some rough, bumpy times, but Brad was always, he was like he was like the Labrador puppy. Didn't know any different. I'm not going to change my ways. I'm just going to, be that high energy guy that I am. So
I love it. Yeah. Now he did say a few weeks ago, I said over under, when are you going to come out and finally see your BFF? And he said under 2.5 years. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. I mean, it shouldn't have been this long already. We're already kind of in the over territory. So
yeah,
like extending it another 2.5 years, I think we can get him in under that window.
Nice. Now, if he comes in as a tourist, what's the itinerary? Where are you going to take him as a host?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like, hopefully it come in during a sporting event time, so we can take him either to Climate Pledge or to T-Mobile, or take him to a game, take him downtown. I mean, what would you do with Brad? I'm trying to think. Like, it's I would take him on the ferry, and show him probably a little bit of downtown Paulsbo, take him to some breweries and local brewery fare and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, Paulsbo's phenomenal. I mean, that's such a great little town. Definitely, have him experience that. But then obviously, you got to go to Seattle. He's got to go to Pike Place. He's got to, go to a game of some sort.
And if it's in 2.5 years, the waterfront's going to be completely changed.
Yeah.
What they have planned on the waterfront since they took the viaduct down is going to be awesome when it's all
there. You go.
So there you go.
Find him some tequila, and I think he'll have a good time.
That's true. We do have to do that for sure.
So what at this time in your life are you really grateful for?
I'm grateful for in the fantasy industry for Brad Evans. One of my longest running friends and guy that I've worked with forever, and guy who has my back and I have his back. And it's nice to know you have someone that's that tight in the industry. So from an industry side, and guys like you, just people that I've met along the way, and we remain friends, and, but, probably the biggies on the personal side, family, health, friends, and just, not a mountain of debt. Things are good for the most part. Like I can't, my problems are mostly first world. So, I mean, that's good. Gonna need to put a new roof on the house. So that's probably my biggest issue going right now. And that's, if I can afford it and that's the worst thing that's going, then I'm things are going pretty well.
Not too bad. Obviously 2023 season, I mean, it's been pretty wild. Talk about things that are going well. Obviously Seahawks looking good, and then Baltimore happened, and then what's your stance on the Seahawks right now, and Geno and what you expect? Obviously they got a tough schedule coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, they're good. Not great. They're not San Francisco, Philadelphia level, Dallas even. The offense is sputtering more than we thought. Geno's regressed a little bit. I feel like the defense has guys that can just be phenomenal in the second half, and this team can really coalesce around the defensive side. They got to get the offense going, though, a little bit more. I don't know that they've established quite their personality and their identity yet. So they got some work to do.
It is exciting to see some of the young defensive players,
I know it's good.
Food. I mean, it's pretty fun, and obviously
they're set up to be good for the next few years in a big time way, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I love Walker and Charbonnet. So I mean, there's obviously JSN. I mean, he's had little flashes where you can see what you got in him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got there's a lot of mouths to feed suddenly on offense, and it hasn't been consistent though. I just don't know. What do you think? I mean, you got 3 really good receivers, yet they want to run the ball, yet they don't always commit fully to running it, or it doesn't work. And I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes Geno's holding onto the ball too long. They're running. Like, I know when things go bad and he's getting sacked a lot, they're not running quick hitter routes enough. They're running these routes that are too far downfield. And so like, I think they need to get that fixed, where they need to get, like, a lot of teams you'll see, they have these dump offs to the running backs or to the tight end kind of vanished, like that's been a thing that's been kind of part of this offense. And, when's the last time we said, oh, Noah Fant had a big day or whatever, you know, they gotta mix it around and kind of combat that pressure that Geno gets and help him to get rid of the ball a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know, obviously offensive line, getting hurt earlier in the season, did that lead to some of Geno's, inability to make quick decisions, or some of his bad decisions? Or is it just, where Geno's at now? So hard to tell. You got all these weapons, but you're right. On 3rd and short, they'll throw it long. On 3rd and long, they'll throw it short. Like, it's just the weirdest thing to figure out. I mean, obviously they're essentially taking what the defense is giving them, but it's not what you need. So, like, you gotta take shots and get first downs.
Well, and that was kind of the Colin Carter Russell when he was there. Was the 3rd and short, and we threw it long, and it worked. That was there was enough of that. I think it's kind of sort of gotten to the DNA a little bit, and they have a hard time sometimes shaking that up.
That's tricky, yeah. So on the fantasy front, I mean, is there obviously we're looking at the second half of the season coming up? Is there one quarterback, one running back, one wide receiver, one tight end that you're excited for moving forward that you think is going to have a strong finish in fantasy?
I'm going to kind of preach to the choir on CJ Stroud. I just think that he throws the prettiest ball in the league right now. Like in Mahomes and other people might have better arms, but he's got a great arm, but he just throws such a beautiful ball. And I've noticed one of the bugaboos about him early on was he just wasn't as good under pressure. He's actually getting a lot better under pressure now. And like, we're seeing him elevate his game. So I think CJ Stroud is a guy I'm excited about. From a fantasy standpoint, Brock Purdy's going to be good the second half. He's got all of his weapons, and they got a schedule that I think he can take advantage of. So I'm not going to give you chalk with like Jalen Hurts and things like that. But yeah, I mean, Purdy and Stroud. Running back wise, I'd want all the Josh Jacobs I could get, just because, since the Antonio Pierce has taken over, like I think it's been like 25 and 26 carries, and they're going to just run him into the ground. So like, we love that, because the bell cow volume back is a dying breed. And and the guy that you're just going to get consistent mid-20s touches, is, sign me up for that every week, and we'll just let the chips fall where they may. Receiving wise, I mean, CeeDee Lamb's on fire. His season is set up, and he was on fire at the end of last year, kind of slow out of the gates, and then just went crazy down the stretch. I don't see how he doesn't do that again. Other guys that aren't quite as, chalky, Garrett Wilson and Michael Pittman, they're just going to get volume. It's volume. And Garrett Wilson, even in some ugly games, is 8 for 80, like he's getting 13, 14 targets a game. Yeah. And like, there's nobody else that, Zach Wilson is really looking to. So I'd feel good about that. Tank Dell, because he's going to be a guy that the guy I like, CJ Stroud, is going to lean on. And then I would say Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson are great middle of the tight end one class guys. I think you're going to get consistency out of week in and week out down the stretch as well.
I love it. Great guys. If you got a chance to go get them, because finishing strong in the fantasy season and catching fire before the playoffs is it's the key. The fantasy football season.
Absolutely,
it's a journey, right? You gotta adapt, and you gotta get hot at the right time. So again, so on like the Seattle sports scene front, kind of wrapping it up here, Mariners. This is a fantasy football show, but let's talk Mariners.
Okay.
Brandon Funston, what's going to happen in the next couple of years? Are we any chance we get Ohtani? I mean, any chance that we can actually find some success?
Do you think Dipoto can have an off season that's similar to last year, where he sort of half-assed, the free agency, and especially after Texas in your division went out and spent huge and it worked, and then you go out and say 53% is what we're going for. And it's like, I think he has to make a little bit more, even though he's not going to want to. They're going to have to do a little bit more than they did last year. And it's going to have to be on the offensive side.
Yeah, I think obviously we'll kind of see what transpires this offseason, and that will probably show us like how much the ownership is the one that's kind of just dictating what they won't do for spending money. Because if they have another offseason like last year, I mean,
Yeah.
what are we doing? Again, with the Sonics, just jacked for them to come back. Hopefully they can put together something fun and bring back some of that love, because they were definitely a beloved team.
Oh man, that's probably my deepest roots, because I was there. Gus Williams was probably my first favorite sports player in a significant way.
There you go.
The 78, 79 Sonics, I loved it. So got a chance to play early days of ESPN Bellevue Club membership for free. Got a chance to play with Jack Sikma because he was a member there. So
nice.
And got to be on a traveling team that went down and played like other, clubs. And so Jack Sikma, being in a van with Jack Sikma, driving from Seattle to Portland, pretty awesome.
That's awesome. I mean, you are a sneaky basketball player too. So yeah,
there you go. Yeah, and that was like I played against him, but then that was going to be when I got to be his teammate, and I was coming off the bench for that team, and he rolled his ankle in the first 5 minutes. I never got to actually be on a team to like give him an assist or or anything like that. So a little bit bummed, but it was a great guy to hang out with.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for the Sonics to return. We need that. We definitely need some basketball injected back into our community
so Kevin Durant can play his final season in the NBA.
Exactly. He's been amazing.
Full circle.
Yeah, he's been amazing over the years when it comes to his, the way he reflects back on Seattle. So
yeah,
I can see
absolutely.
That full circle. I love it. So obviously, you have had such an impactful, an incredible run in the fantasy industry. You've had just a huge influence on the community. What do you advise people that are looking to get more involved in the fantasy industry? You've seen a lot. You've seen it all. What's your advice to people that want to get more involved in the industry?
Yeah, I would say become an expert at something. Become known for something. I think Matt Harmon, reception perception. That's the way you do it. Like you become, and I think. Do what you do. You're a networker. You got to network. You got to know people. You got to become so that your face becomes familiar with a lot of people in the industry. It's still a growing industry. Lots of things are popping up. And I've seen guys that have come in and been freelancers at The Athletic, but they've, it's been a year and they're off, to full-time gigs, ESPN and stuff like that. It's like it seems like a mountain to climb, but all you have to do is just go one step at a time and do it. Don't be daunted by it. But like I said, make sure you are an expert. We call ourselves fantasy experts, but you actually have to be an expert. You have to know the stuff, and the more you can have a niche in which more than most is only going to help you.
That's great advice. Brandon, is there anything that you haven't covered that you want to share before we close things out?
I don't think so. We covered a lot there, man. I like it. A little bit of pop culture, a little bit of Seattle area, a little bit of actual fantasy talk. Most of the times I do these fantasy football podcasts. We're talking about who we're picking up on waivers this week, and things like that. So it's a nice change of pace to answer what my favorite bands and TV shows are and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm at The Athletic. Come check us out. Around the holidays, they have a crazy, insane, cheap deals. They always have a Black Friday special. So if you're ever curious about checking out The Athletic, lots of good stuff there. And that's where I'll be hanging out.
Well, there it is. That's Brandon Funston. Thank you so much again for joining me on this episode, and look forward to seeing what's next for you, my friend.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.